it's been an absolute pleasure to be here and to join a panel with 4 other researchers who are researching graphic art and exhibitions of graphic art. So it's an extreme privilege because there are not too many of us. My today's talk will concern one specific instance of collaboration between Poland, the Polish People's Republic, and the organizers of the Biennial in Ljubljana. The first edition of the periodic graphic art show in Ljubljana came to life under the name the International Exhibition of Graphic Art. It took place in the premises of Moderna galerija between August and September 1955. From the regulations cited in the foreword to the catalogue of the show, we can see that the artistic objectives of the show were equally important as the political ones. The biennial was advertised as a device for, quote, dynamization and democratization of the circles of printmakers in Ljubljana, but at the same time it was meant to testify the success of the Yugoslav policy of non-alignment and third worldism. The first show consisted mostly of works by artists who were personally invited to take part in the competition. The show displayed 144 works of artists who represented 22 countries. The prints presented an enormous divergence of topics and quality, and so the exhibition halls of Moderna galerija saw traditional Bulgarian book illustration hung just next to avant-garde works by Mishkon, or the Japanese modern take on traditional Japanese woodcut juxtaposed with a lithography by Henry Moore. The core of the exhibition, however, was formed by the works of representatives of École de Paris, whose prints were smuggled from Paris to Ljubljana by the efforts of Zoran Krzyżnik, who at the time worked at the Moderna galerija in Ljubljana, and the Slovenian painter Zoran Music, who resided at the time in Paris and who helped Krzyżnik to build contacts with the local artists. The cooperation between Krzyżnik, Music, and also Božidar Jakac brought a selection of prints by the Western artists to Ljubljana, creating a foundation for the first biennial. By bringing the works of the members of the École de Paris, Krzyżnik hoped to turn the biennial into a modernization device for the local artists, who, thanks to the international call for participation, the Biennale assumed could follow the latest artistic trends around the world. The prizes were given by the international jury, which only appeared to be independent and objective in their judgments. However, its members, also recruiting from the local printmakers, had a clear vision of the image the biennial should present. Hence, the first Grand Prix of 1955 was given to a printmaker from the United States, Armin Landek, for his etching titled Colosseum. Arguably, this was neither the most technically advanced print presented at the show, nor its program was particularly compelling. It can be simply said that this was a rather mediocre example of graphic art. And this seems to be the exact reason for which it was chosen. Its message was diluted enough not to raise much questions, and for those who knew, it served its purpose. It was a prompt political message about the direction in which Yugoslavia would like to move from now, leaving behind its affinity to the USSR. From the beginning, the show was built up of bottom-up strivings for artistic emancipation on part of the Ljubljana's artists, which from the other end were constantly cut down by the centralized authorities. Belgrade did not want to give Ljubljana an international event which could elevate Ljubljana's status and turn the biennial into a political tool. Such dangerous leverage could be potentially used against Marshall Tito, who in the mid-1950s was facing separatist tendencies within the League of Communists of Yugoslavia. The fear of secession faded away in 1963 when Yugoslavia introduced a new constitution which brought under control the local separatist aspirations. Having that in mind, the cultural establishment in Ljubljana attempted to please the authorities and depicted the event as an instrument for fostering cultural diplomacy, rather than a tool for emancipation, which could match Tito's policy of non-alignment. As Krzyżnik recalled, the biennial was meant to serve as a device for, quote, linking of East and West by the bridge of art, end of quote, in order to, quote, underline the same active non-engagement that coincides entirely with our conception of international relations, end of quote. In fact, this was only a smokescreen to cover the factual aspiration of Ljubljana's members of artistic establishment who wanted to see their biennial rival with the one established in Venice. Nevertheless, the event was also a political success and found recognition among the upper political echelons in Belgrade. The seal of approval for the biennial was finally granted by Tito in July of 1959 during his symbolic visit to the biennial with his wife Ivanka. The graphic art biennial in Ljubljana was then a mixture of political and artistic aspirations hidden behind the screen of purposefully arranged confusion, and this fact was also reflected in the Polish participation in that show. Early in 1955, just before the first edition of the biennial, the contact between the Polish printmakers and the Yugoslav cultural circles was established through the Polish Committee for Cultural Cooperation with Foreign Countries, which operated from 1950 until 1956, and which, despite the tense situation between the countries of the Eastern Bloc and Yugoslavia, still maintained continuous cultural contacts and exchange with Belgrade. At the first exhibition in Ljubljana, Poland was represented only by three figures: Maria Hiszpańska-Neumann, Andrzej Rudziński, and Andrzej Jurkiewicz, each of whom presented 5 prints. Such a small number of artists does not constitute a representative sample of Polish printmaking, and hence it would be difficult to talk here about any national representation. Interestingly, the biennial's archive in Ljubljana contains 2 more records of Polish artists entering the competition in 1955. Aleksander Kobzdej and Tadeusz Kulisiewicz also submitted their works. However, these were not included in the exhibition, the reason being they were executed in ink and therefore were not reproducible, hence they did not fall under the exhibition's regulations. And here we can see the record sheets from the archive depicting the rejected ink drawings. It may appear surprising that in the mid-1950s the Polish People's Republic was invited to Ljubljana. At the end of the day, the time was very turbulent. The first biennial took place before Khrushchev's visit to Belgrade in May 1955, and the following revisit paid by Tito to Moscow in 1956, which slightly defrosted the relations between the Eastern Bloc and Yugoslavia. It was also before the liberalization of the Polish October of 1956 and the subsequent events such as the exhibition at Warsaw's Arsenal. Still, despite all the potential obstacles, Poland maintained cooperation with Yugoslavia. Even though the Polish People's Republic never overstepped the official political bounds which were in place between both countries, it played a double game in the diplomatic relations, balancing between Yugoslavia and the USSR. And this game was played continuously from the very early on. On 16th of March 1946, both countries signed the Convention on Cultural Cooperation between the Polish People's Republic and the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The agreement was kept in place despite the Tito-Stalin Split and was maintained until 14th July 1956, when it was renewed and further expanded. The new agreement assumed, among the others, mutual translation of literary works, establishing funds for academic travels, and also exchanging exhibitions. What is more, the Polish People's Republic, as the only country of the Eastern Bloc, did not close its embassy in Belgrade after the events of 1948. Jan Karol Wende served as the Polish ambassador there from 1945 until 1950, when he was called back to Warsaw to become the chair of the Committee for Cultural Cooperation with Foreign Countries, which is very also telling in the context of Polish participation in the biennial. An entity which the committee was an entity which was affiliated to the Council of Ministers, so a direct connection with the upper echelons of the party. The Yugoslav direction was high on the agenda of the Polish authorities, which fact was confirmed during the subsequent editions of the biennial in Ljubljana. Between 1955 and 1988, the Polish printmakers received 20 prizes and participated in every edition of the biennial. This was an exception among the countries of the Eastern Bloc. For example, the USSR missed two initial editions of the biennial, while Czechoslovakia was not present after 1968. Poles sent their prints to Ljubljana despite all the political turbulence, such as the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. And so the second biennial, which took place in 1957, saw works of 7 Polish artists. Marian Malina, who was by then a recognized, internationally recognized artist, Jerzy Panek, Stanisław Wójtowicz, Tadeusz Dominik, Adam Marczyński, and for the second time, Andrzej Rudziński and Maria Hiszpańska-Neumann. The honorary award was presented to Adam Marczyński for his dry poem titled Winter, which arguably was the most progressive and experimental work among the Polish representation. Since the second biennial, a Polish or Czechoslovak representative was also regularly invited to join the jury board, with a Polish art critic Mieczysław Porębski serving since 1957 as the main ambassador of the cooperation. The Polish representation did not miss the third edition either, despite the crisis of 1958, which was caused by the new political direction assumed by the League of Communists of Yugoslavia after the 7th Congress of the party that took place in Ljubljana. The new political assumptions presented in the capital of the People's Republic of Slovenia caused outrage in Moscow, which resulted in a cancellation of Tito's visit to Poland that was planned for July 1958. These events, however, neither stopped Poles from sending their prints to Ljubljana, nor prevented Stanisław Wójtowicz from receiving the prize for his woodcut titled Dream 30. The third edition of the biennial gathered a more representative selection of Polish works and saw an increasing emphasis placed over the novelty and modernist approach to the medium and subject matter, with a simultaneous decrease of the political significance of the message carried by these works. The Polish representation grew to 14 artists who submitted a total of 42 prints, 3 prints from each of the artists. The names included Halina Chrostowicz-Piotrowska, Hanna Dąbrowska, Józef Gielniak, Antoni Haska, Maria Hiszpańska-Neumann, Tadeusz Lipiński, Józef Pakulski, Jerzy Panek, Edmund Piotrowicz, Andrzej Rudziński, Ewa Śliwińska, Stefan Suberlak, Jan Tarasin, and Stanisław Wójtowicz. So it was really a crosscut of what was happening in Poland in terms of graphic art. The policy of awarding Polish printmakers seemed to remain independent from the macro politics and rather follow the cultural agreements established between Poland and Yugoslavia, which held a connection in place despite the subsequent crises. From the 4th edition of 1961 until 1967, the number of Polish artists participating in the show was continuously growing. However, only one artist, that was Józef Gielniak, was awarded during that period. The rising of the international position of Polish printmakers followed the emancipation process the Polish printmakers symbolically started back home in 1959, when the competition for the best print of the month was established in Krakow by Witold Skulic, the event which led to the formation of the biennial in Krakow and the gradual crystallization of Krakow's graphic art school. Thus, the road to the first international biennial of graphic arts in Krakow led also through Ljubljana, where the key artists involved in its organization became recognized. For example, in 1961, Mieczysław Wejman, who was one of the founding fathers of the Krakow's biennial, received a prize for his linocut. The edition of 1961 was particularly fruitful for the Polish printmakers, who received 3 prizes. Apart from Wejman, Barbara Kwaśniewska and Stefan Suberlak were awarded high prizes. The exhibition in Ljubljana slowed down after the Prague Spring as a result of a political support for the revolution expressed by the Yugoslav authorities. Just 10 days before the intervention of the Warsaw Pact troops, which began on August 21, 1968, a delegation from the Central Committee of League of Communists of Yugoslavia, headed by Mieczysław Tito, visited Prague to reassure the Czechoslovak government of the positive mutual relations. The events of March 1968 and the Polish forces joining the military operation in Czechoslovakia after Tito became disillusioned with Gomułka, so the leader of the Polish People's Republic, and his policy of balancing between the USSR and Yugoslavia. This, however, again did not really affect neither the volume nor the content of the prints Poles were sending to the competition, both institutionally through the Central Committee of the Association of Polish Artists and Designers, and also privately. In mid-1969, mutual relations between the USSR and Yugoslavia improved again. A new period began, which lasted until Tito's death in 1980. It was the period of the most stable and gradually increasing intensity of the cooperation between the USSR and the countries of the Warsaw Pact, and also Yugoslavia. Apart from the reaction to the Helsinki Agreement of 1975, which resulted in greater emphasis and move towards the topics such as disarmament or natural habitat, the biennial maintained its formula throughout the 1970s and did not see major changes, still advocating for non-alignment and third worldism. The Biennale served its purpose until Tito's death in 1980 and collapse of the concept of non-alignment, and after this point the Ljubljana started to show loss of its importance. While the intensity of the hardline political links between Yugoslavia and the Polish People's Republic fluctuated over time, the cultural cooperation remained in place despite all political hesitation. Even though Ljubljana usually saw a crosscut of the most recent developments in the Polish printmaking, the Polish representation never formed a uniform voice, seemingly maintaining a safe distance from the political affairs and focusing on artistic developments of the medium. Even though the apparent message of the works presented during the show were in many cases politically neutral, the sole fact that Poland continuously participated in this exhibition is a strong political message, which was only hidden behind the smokescreen created by the multitude of works, artists, and nations participating. This cacophony of graphic motifs, or the foral, foralny in Polish, modality of graphic art, as Mieczysław Porębski put it, became a true blessing for the organizers of the show, who could use it to neutralize any expectations towards the show that were coming from the outside of the circle controlling the show. Foral, foralny, as opposed to canonical art, can be characterized by its accessibility, multivocality, and syncretism. Foral art functions in open cultural space, or ikonosfera, as Mieczysław Porębski put it, and due to its iconoclastic potential, has the necessary attribute to create and replicate such cultural space. In the space created by foral art, a constant exchange of short and simple messages takes place, just like at the exhibition of graphic art that presents several hundreds of exhibits. Graphic art, due to its reproducibility, is a perfect catalyst for such exchanges, which turn the graphic art biennial into a political carnivalesque. Porębski used to say that graphic art is unruly, that is, it escapes classifications and is a type of trickster medium. In 1964, in the Polish art magazine Projekt, Polish art critic Mieczysław Porębski defined exhibitions as, quote, enclaves of organized information, end of quote. Given the foral modality of graphic art, makes me wonder how far the graphic art biennials were such organized exhibitions, and how much they should be rather called curated exhibitions. Organized means sorted according to a specific logic, and above all, according to clear criteria, which interconnect the elements of an array. What were the criteria for selecting works in Ljubljana? Were they followed? Additionally, if we take into consideration the enormous amount of artists submitting their prints, up to several thousands, and the vast multiplicity of the awarded works, up to 30 prizes were given during a single show, those exhibitions does not appear as organized, but rather as purposefully disorganized enclaves of information. Graphic art exhibitions were without doubt spaces which were governed, and this in turn leads to another vast problem. If they were governed, who was the governor? For the first time in this part of the world, the exhibitions were governed by figures who could be named curators in the modern sense of this word. The graphic art exhibitions introduced in Central and East Central Europe a completely new type of cultural worker by turning art administrators, or if you prefer, art exhibition commissars, into curators, and in some cases even into celebrity figures that would go under today's name of star curators. In this respect, it is not just a matter of mere semantics. At the end of the day, commissar means curator in French. But the main difference, however, between a commissar and a curator was the level of independence of decision-making this new type of cultural worker obtained. An emancipation that was arguably started as early as 1955 in Ljubljana. In such light, graphic art exhibition shows and the international cooperation they instigated can be seen as tools for democratization of the societies, establishing links and building relations, but at the same time, we should not forget that they were very powerful devices for installing deception, propaganda, and even self-interest. Thank you.